Tim Burton is a filmmaker obsessed with peculiarities of life and death, of small oddities and unusual personas. It is joyous, triumphant, and uplifting to see him return to his signature style of storytelling. In the era of corporate greed that is sucking the life and delight out of cinema, you can't begin to fathom how excited it makes me that a filmmaker my 14-year-old self was passionate about found a way back to his way of doing movies. Because Beetlejuice is exactly that movie. The movie my younger self would be obsessed with. Strange and whimsical, filled with great actors, having fun with their roles, odd and curious production design, elements of horror, gory enough to get excited about but not scary enough that you can't show to kids, soundtrack that you want to sink your teeth into, and above all else, a story that is equal parts fun, hilariously out there at times, and heartfelt in the right moments. All soaked in the Tim Burton aesthetic that has been around long enough to be named after him. The previously established formula still applies. Burton creates the mood and tone of the story with his signature writing, lighting, character and production design that can be traced all the way back to his first ever short film, called Vincent.
He doesn't mind living with his sister, dog, and cats, though he'd rather share a home with spiders and bats.
All of his films focus on existential dread, ghoulish monsters, and macabre of everyday life. Art design focuses on two contrasting sides: naturalistic, the exaggerated take on American suburbia, and theatrical, defined by gothic overtones, machinations, and the style of German expressionism. All of it sprinkled with whimsical sounds of Danny Elfman's score, who has worked with Burton on nearly 20 projects together. Beetlejuice shows that Burton has found joy again in his filmmaking. It took him years to get to that point, but finally, after struggling for almost 20 years in the studio system, he returns in style. And I wouldn't go as far as to call Beetlejuice a masterpiece, but it is definitely his best movie since Corpse Bride and Sweeney Todd era. It has its problems, too many characters and plot lines that could be developed into separate movies easily, but I feel like the heart of the movie, the relationship between Jenna Ortega and Winona Ryder's characters, makes it worthwhile. It boils down to a very simple story in the end. An estranged mother and daughter trying to communicate time and time again, and failing, building resentment and struggling with past traumas, trying to process them when eventually current events force them to work together and see each other's perspective without judgment, forming a loving relationship once again amid all of the craziness and strange and unusual. Supported by a wonderfully narcissistic and funny grandmother, played by Catherine O'Hara, who just makes everything better. Always.
What? Why?
This is still the same self-centered Delia we know from the original, but she has wisdom now, which was both hilarious and fitting for this character. They also found a way to get rid of another character's likeness that we won't even spend a minute talking about, but I thought it was brilliantly executed. Amazing actors like Monica Bellucci or Willem Dafoe make a cameo, but as far as supporting characters go, no one shines brighter than Michael Keaton as Beetlejuice. It feels like no time has passed since he played him, and for everyone who says that comedy is doomed because you're not allowed to joke about certain stuff these days, there's Beetlejuice. All in all, this movie feels nostalgic for a time when we were still allowed to be weirdos and be truly original and individualistic. Barton's movies are not the ones who will win any awards or draw MCU-type numbers to the movie theater. They are for the strange and the unusual crowd. But we need movies like this like we need oxygen. The best compliment I can give it, and I swear it is a compliment, is that it is wonderfully mediocre in the best ways. It makes me hopeful for the American film industry that needs to go back to making mid-budget passion projects again. It boosts your imagination and creativity, which is what all movies should be doing. And it also makes another thing painfully obvious, that Hollywood is currently divided into people who know how to make movies and the ones who don't. But those who don't somehow stay on top. And I wouldn't be honest if I didn't make an observation that those who know what they're doing are the old dogs. Martin Scorsese, Tim Burton, Christopher Nolan, Steven Spielberg. The difference though is that the old guard can't get funding and support for their original ideas. But somehow the unseasoned writers and directors get unlimited funding and backing from the studios. Even though this is arguably one of the worst periods of American filmmaking ever, the market this year is organically fact-checking the industry. And that makes me so happy again. Films done with care and passion are being celebrated, like Dune Part 2 and Beetlejuice, whereas soulless cash grabs are massively rejected by the audiences, like The Crow remake, The Acolyte, or The Rings of Power. Good filmmaking needs to be championed again. The fact that we even are in this position is a perfect example of why you should never make any decisions based on the internet's discourse. The rise of anti-intellectualism online is one of my biggest pet peeves. But I can't be angry at younger audiences, not really. For the most part, Gen Z and Gen Alpha have been raised in the world of mindless cinema. Marvel movies, streaming shows, book talk smut. It is impossible to develop a taste for good things if you haven't been exposed to them in your formative years. This is also why Jenna Ortega's rise to stardom is so funny, because you can argue that she is Gen Z's biggest star, right? Zendaya, Chalamet, Florence, Tom Holland, all of them are just on the cusp of millennial mindset. But Jenna Ortega is Gen Z, and yet she rejects everything that Gen Z proudly stands for online. She loves old movies, she drinks, she smokes, she engages in intellectual debates, chooses projects with Lolita-type characters, loves horror and dangerous topics, doesn't involve herself in activist discourse, and yet the cinema is bursting with viewers, young viewers, who have come to see only her. She's also insanely talented, so there's that, of course. If she is the sign of the times, then I am hopeful again. I am not worried anymore about the younger generation having someone truly interesting to look up to. And you can laugh and say, well, is that all you care about? Is someone who smokes and is controversial? No, not at all. I care about someone who speaks their own mind, who is authentic, who is not a TikTok clone with the same face, the same hair, the same clothes, the same rehearsed speeches from their publicists. Younger generation deserves a star that is authentic and beautiful, inside and out. To quote the movie in the most meta way, you're quoting Dostoevsky? Where have you been my whole life? Hey guys, it has been a while. I have unfortunately been sick with COVID for the last 3 weeks. So I hope you will forgive me that this was so short. I am still getting my groove back, but new videos are coming about Rings of Power and maybe Emily in Paris. And I'm also thinking about a video on Glenn Powell and Jenna Ortega's rise to stardom this year, which I briefly touched upon here, but I feel like it deserves its own video. Let me know what you guys think. Thank you so much for watching, liking, and subscribing, and I will see you later.